Today, I want to talk about children because I didn't have any, but I raised a lot of kids. I think I need to talk about it because my whole life, because I don't have biological children, it feels probably I'm not alone in this, that whenever the topic of anything involving a child comes up, whatever it might be, um, parenting habits, child abuse, psychological trauma, it always seems to come back to this premise that because you haven't produced any, you don't know. You don't know. And tell me what I don't know when I've spent my whole life helping to fix other people's fucked up relationships with their parents as an educator, when I buried more than one student, when I've stood in front of the largest audience I've ever stood in front of in my entire life to eulogize a student who had laid his body down from great heights, somebody we love dearly and who traumatized us all. Just try telling me I don't understand what it is to have children. Now, I was the oldest child. I was the oldest grandchild. I was the oldest grandchild on both sides of the family, and my parents were young parents. And that's as I've grown older that I come to understand that that's the unique aspect of my relationship with my parents. Not only are they not old people now that I'm old, my father has predeceased me by a good many years, but my mother, though she was 21 when she was pregnant with me, and as I've moved through life, I've come to feel that she's more, particularly at this point in my life, pushing 70, that I have more in common with hers in terms of shared experience than I'll ever have with anybody else in this world. But also that we have moved through this life together, and we've moved through raising children together. I mean, as the eldest, who was born in the 50s, it's like there was a tribe of children that came right after me. In my family, it's like everybody was birthing babies in the 50s and 60s. And if you were the oldest at any family gathering, you were always the one. If you were the oldest and you were a responsible, good boy, good kid, as I was, you took care of the other kids. You watched out for them. You made sure they were safe. And in turn, the parents felt that the kids were in good hand because little Billy had an eye on them. And it takes a village. I mean, that's the world that we lived in. It takes a village view of parenting and children. By the time I was in my early teens, I was a champion babysitter. Uh, I was famous in the neighborhood for being the babysitter that could take on problem kids that were difficult, kids that were acting up, kids that would certainly be on Ritalin today. Um, and I could cope with them. And I've been reflect, reflecting on what it was that I did. I think that the main thing I did was I didn't let kids freak me out, and I didn't scream at them, and I didn't rise to their level of anger or anxiety. And I recognized, because I grew up around children, I understood the developmental phases of children, and that you don't talk to a 2-year-old like you talk to a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old. Um, I understood that you don't ask a 4-year-old what language they'd like to learn. There were many things that I've seen in parents, I've seen in the parenting styles of people I know and I love very much, where I'm like, it's very clear that they had no experience dealing with children when they themselves had children. And so I remember especially some these kids who lived up the block a bit, and the father was this beautiful, really super handsome airline pilot. The mother had been an airline stewardess, and she was gorgeous and blonde and had all this hair, and the two of them were definitely the most handsome movie star couple in the neighborhood. And their kids were terrors. We'll call them little Johnny and little Joni, but Johnny especially, this boy was probably, I, uh, I guess he was about 7 years old, 6 or 7. And he had terrorized all the girl babysitters in the neighborhood. These parents were at their wits' end. They couldn't find anybody who would agree to babysit these horrible children, especially the boy. And so they leave me alone with them. And kids seemed nice enough. And it's bedtime. They went to bed. And then I start hearing little Johnny's upstairs. I'm downstairs. It's another 3 or 4 hours or whatever till the parents come home. So I'm down doing what I'm doing, reading probably or watching TV. And I hear him in the bedroom upstairs, and he's just throwing things around. He's screaming. It's like drawers are opening and shutting, closets, drawers. He's going off, and he's just completely. But I knew nobody was. No furniture was being overturned, but he was making a hell of a racket and screaming the whole time. And I thought my natural inclination was to just wait until he stopped because I knew what he wanted. I knew the kid was attention starved. I didn't know, but later found out that the family was really messed up, that the father was having affairs, that there were rumors of sex parties in the house. There were all kinds of reasons that this kid would be would be a distressed boy. And so I didn't know that at the time. So he's making all this noise, and eventually it stops because he's a kid. He's not going to keep doing that if there's no response, right? So there's no response. It's all of a sudden dead quiet. I go upstairs, door's shut on his bedroom. I knock on the bedroom door. He says, come in, I come in. And the room is a mess. He's opened up all the drawers and closets and everything out of his bureau is strewn all over, whatever it was, shirts, pants, underwear, socks, you name it. Everything was thrown all over the place. Nothing was broken, however. Everything was like just strewn all over so it could be put back. And I looked at this stuff, but I didn't look at it. I had no reaction. I didn't get mad. I knew why he did it. And I said, do you want to play a game? And he said, sure. And we went downstairs and we played some kind of board game. They had board games downstairs. And whatever we played, Chutes and Ladders, it was something that was age appropriate. And didn't last long. It was a short game. And then he was ready to go to bed and he went to bed. That was that. So, but I think word got around that if you had problem kids, I was the guy. There was this sort of recognition that by the time I was in my early, yeah, by the time I was 18, 19, that I was particularly good with kids. Now I had a girlfriend then who later turned out to be my lesbian girlfriend, but she didn't come out for another 25 years or so, didn't come until middle age. But it's like my girlfriend and I were really serious about having children. That was the cornerstone of our relationship. We knew she was going to be a concert pianist. She was a really gifted piano player. I was going off to Georgetown University to study international politics. And we had imagined a life that we were going to have together. And it was going to be sort of we were going to be urban pioneers. We were going to buy a place in the city on one of the lakes, which were really cheap in the 1970s. If you had any kind of reasonable job, you could have afforded such a place. And we were going to raise our 2 kids to be sort of water-loving, cultured kids and just support whatever interests they had. And we named them Marvin and Chunny. If these kids had ever come into this world, they probably would have hated us for those names. But then I think we thought that those kids, if we gave them names like Marvin and Chunny, that they would have to grow into those names. And I like those names. And so forever, to this day, I still think of these children I should have had with my lesbian girlfriend. And it would have been interesting to see how they turned out. So when I came out, I came out at a young age, it was people, the only gay couples I knew that had children were people who lived a heterosexual life and had children. And that was the only model. It was not possible legally to figure out any process, really, unless you were a very smart attorney. I don't know how you do it to adopt a child. I mean, in virtually every state, it was not possible for a single male to adopt a child. Now, my roommate at the time, my best friend forever, my friend Beth, who died a long time ago now of the stupid, fucking, horrible cancer. And as I've said in another podcast, I'll never forgive the world, never forgive the universe for that. But at the time, we were joined at the hip, and she had. She was her attitude about children was a bit like W.C. Fields, when he'd talk about children, this wise cracking, yeah. But her view was basically if she'd have a child, if it could come out of her womb, and she'd just give it to you. And it's kind of like Michael Jackson style when he got his baby. It's like the umbilical cord was, you take the umbilical cord and you run out of the hospital. There's a story of him doing that. But that was her idea. It's like she doesn't want anything to do with it. She'll go through it because she thought it would be a noble thing to have a child with me, a kind of turkey baster baby kind of thing, if you will. I mean, we were talking about having sex, but we'd figure out some way to make it happen, to get my sperm inside her. And yeah, so the baby would come out and she'd hand me the baby and I would go away and raise it. And then when the kid could have an adult conversation at around 18 or 19, should sit down, he or she would sit down with their mom, have a conversation and should have a wonderful adult relationship with the child. But that was, we laughed about it. We laughed about it for years, but we were sort of serious because I just always felt from the time I was a little boy that I wanted to have children. I just thought that's what I would do when I grow up. And so when it was clear I was gay, I just thought I'll figure out some way to make this happen. And it seemed like a sort of reasonable way of working it, though we ended up just laughing our asses off over it. And of course, all the external pressures, everybody was telling me, because I had this international life, I had a life in the arts, I had a life in education. Everybody said, you can't have this life if you have children. Well, yeah, I know. But there was always this unspoken assumption that you could either have this sort of big international arty life or you could settle down and have children. There was nothing in between. There was no way if you had children, you could integrate it into the kind of life that I had. So, I mean, and behind all of that was this idea that I was somehow selfish, that I was just doing whatever the fuck I wanted with life. I never had to answer to anybody. I could just follow my own dream. And those, and other people who had children were tied down and they were serious-minded people. And I really didn't understand what the real world was like, because of course I was an academic as well. So that means I really didn't understand the real world. Like childless academic, what could be more, isolated from the real world than such a person? Again, no matter that, I've spent my life's work, dealing with the consequences of fucked up parenting, and have been to more than one funeral of beautiful young souls. At any rate, so time moves on, and I have a boyfriend. He's Filipino, Phil M. He's from Hawaii. He's a good guy. I'm thinking, I could have kids with him. In retrospect, I think if Doug and I, if we had been able to have a conversation, if I was able to say, Doug, I love you. Stop having sex with strangers. Can we just stop? Can you just stop doing that? Because I really want to settle down with you and have a family. And he would have been great because he was like Hawaiian, Filipino, nature boy, good-hearted guy, fun, good with children. His cousins and his family back in Hawaii absolutely loved him. He went back to Hawaii when he contracted HIV and had a good many years and became a kind of a famous sort of HIV positive activist and also a sort of lounge singer and a performer and an entertainer. He became like Eric. He would have been a good dad. I have to say, Doug would have been a good dad. So years later, I'm now with somebody I've been with for, at that point, I've been with him for over a decade. And we're living in Singapore and we take a trip to Australia on vacation. And I'm at Bondi. I'm now 37 years old and I'm really feeling whatever the male equivalent of womb envy is, it hit me like a frickin' ton of bricks at the age of 37. And I'm sitting in an outdoor cafe, probably smoking back then because cigarettes were cheap and it was a nice sunny day and I'm at the beach. And it was the first time in my life I had seen men pushing baby carriages or prams, right? And I saw them in abundance. And suddenly, I don't know if this was a figment of my imagination or if it really happened, but all around me, I saw men tending to babies and small children. And without women being present, they were taking care of the children. And it made me cry. I'm sitting there smoking my morning cigarettes. I was maybe having a conversation with Dane, but it just seemed so present and so unexpected at the beach in Australia. It's the 90s. I didn't think I would see that, but it really, I think that moment we started having a conversation. Now, Dane, my partner, that long-term partner, had no interest at all in having children, but we did joke about it. And again, it was never really clear if are we really going somewhere with this conversation or are we serious? And we thought, well, we can't have children of our own, but we can adopt. And Asian children need homes, and we're living in Asia. We're living in Singapore. And so as a sort of trial run, he thought he'd run it by my mother. And he asked her out of the blue in some conversation about something completely different. He says to my mom, he says, Roseanne, what would you think if Will and I adopted a little Thai princess? Oh, I realize how bad that sounds, but that's what he said. It was the 90s. Geez. But, and my mom, who speaks in terms of parables and stories. She doesn't say, that's a terrible idea. You really shouldn't do that. And this is why. She doesn't do that. Instead, she tells quite a lengthy story about how some people that she knew she knew the people that she knew or, friends of friends or, people who knew people who she knew or whatever. And they had adopted a kid from an Asian country, and the kid turned out to, it's quite a long story, and the telling of it had fetal alcohol syndrome or some kind of developmental disorders that weren't apparent at the time of adoption. And the moral of the story basically was, it's not a good idea, So by parable, it was like, yeah. And I wouldn't really have expected her to say anything other than that, give a story in a kind way, but without saying, no, I think that's a terrible idea, Dane. So the years go by and and suddenly I'm in my mid 40s and I'm single and it's too late. It really feels too late. I don't want to be 65 and I don't want to be 65 at my kids' graduation ceremony, whether it's high school or college or whatever it is. I don't want to be an old dad. I had young parents and I had parents who were with me over the course of quite a long life. And particularly my mother, who's still here at 92. It's like I had my father till he was 70, which meant I had him until I was pushing 50. I was in my late 40s. And so if you're fortunate enough to have parents who are, well, loving parents and you have a good relationship with them, to have that shared period of time with them is such a gift. It just is. And the idea of depriving a child I would have, a child I would raise of that, of all those years of being an adult with another adult who's your parent, I couldn't imagine that. I'm like, oh, I'm checking out. I'm 30. Bye. I'm out of here. And you're gonna bye, kid. You're 30. I'm out of here. Yeah, I'm an old man now. Got to take care of me. No, I couldn't see that. So it's like, so there was no. I'm going to be a single guy adopting a child, and it's like, but this is around the same moment when gay couples are starting to get married and then marry legally, and they're surrogate children, raising children. And everywhere I look now, it seems like, the cities I've lived in, it's like I see gay dads everywhere. I see gay dads everywhere raising children. Um, and I guess I feel like I missed the boat. But on the other hand, I certainly wouldn't be spending 50, 60, 70,000 dollars on a surrogate rent-a-womb either. I'd like to think that uh, I don't think my genetic material is all that fantastic. It's like I think there are so many other kids in this world that really need to be raised in reasonable, loving homes. And I don't think that if I were a 35-year-old today, I would be renting a womb because I needed a genetic replicant or of me or my partner. I had this conversation years ago with a famous artist. I won't mention his name. He probably wouldn't appreciate it, but it's like, and he was a good looking guy, and it was some years ago, and I was really good looking too. I'm still okay, and but we both came from families where there was, in his case, there was a whole lot of mental illness. So we spent this dinner talking about the kids we would have if we had kids. What would they be like? And we agreed that they would be good looking and that they would be smart, and that they might have some artistic inclinations, right? Our children, whether we had them individually or together. But it's like, oh, the mental health crises with his kids, the possibility of mental health crises. And then in my family, where I had a branch of my family where there's quite a bit of bipolar, two grandparents really would be with contemporary, of course they found one another, both bipolar, and then alcoholism on the non-bipolar side, and then and then in some cases a combination of bipolar and chemical dependency. So the kids would really, it's like, do you really want to pass on those genes? It's a bit of a crapshoot. It's like, yeah, they might be nice looking, easy on the eyes, they won't be model handsome. They won't have the perfect chin and jawline, okay? But they'll be like reasonably good looking and they'll be smart. They might be like really messed up and they might drink themselves to death. So under those circumstances, do you really need your own genetic material be passed on? Well, at this point in my life, it is well and truly too late. There is no, I see these tragic guys and I'm sorry, I do think of it as a little tragic starting a new family at the age of 65, over 60, starting a new family with a much younger partner, and having children that you'll be being wheeled around in a chair by the time they're graduating from college. And I just can't, I just can't do that. So it's like, the ship has sailed. you know, it's like, it's definitely passed. And for me, I guess the realization is that I've spent my whole life dealing with other people's fucked up parenting. And I got a lot of kids. And they regard me as this sort of other dad in some cases, and they've told me so. Or a surrogate supplemental dad, the dad on the side. Um, and I'm still available, I'm still present for them and I'm present in their lives. And that's good enough. Yeah, that's more than good enough, actually.